Hey, everybody, welcome to the Faith and Life podcast. My name is Mike Weaver, lead pastor at St. Luke Lutheran Church in Gahanna, Ohio, and with me is
Greg Osborne. I'm the student pastor at St. Luke Lutheran Church in Gahanna, Ohio.
that's right.
Uh,
Uh, and we're always having this conversation, the two of us,
yeah.
man. And but we are Gahanna, but we're also Columbus. We're kind of edge of Gahanna.
Yeah, like our front yard's Gahanna, our backyard's Westerville, our side yard's New Albany. And so but we're technically, if someone breaks into our church, we have to call Columbus City Police.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
not the Gahanna Police. So we are like that's even that. Like we don't call Westerville, we don't call New Albany, we call Columbus. So like our front road is across the street from us is Gahanna. Our street that we're on is Columbus. Our backyard's Westerville, and our side yard's New Albany.
It's so weird.
It's our
So weird.
hodgepodge of a church.
Yeah. And here we are, planted right there, the smack dab in the middle of all that. Here we are. And today we're going to talk about Christian voices in public dialogue,
Mm.
how faith leaders and Christians engage respectively in cultural debates. That's a little bit of a light topic, don't you think, Greg?
We were just talking off camera that this is episode 99. We'll see after this if we can get to 100.
Right, exactly. We might be here all day. We're not going to be, but there's a lot to be said around this, and we're going to dig into it as we always do into a topic. But today, I'm going to start out as we always do, just with a question. Here's the question I'm going to throw to you. What do you prefer? Okay,
Okay.
the zoo, a circus, a carnival, county fair, or a parade?
Zoo. Easy.
That's
Easy
an
answer.
easy one, huh?
Easy answer.
Why?
We're not fair people. Like we don't take the girls to the fair. I just there's too I don't like the rides. I don't trust rides. I don't want my kids to get into wanting to ride the rides. Like that stuff scares me. Like if it can, I've seen enough of the videos. I'm like, nope. So and then carnival would be fine. I think. No, a circus it would be fine. I'd have fun at a circus. Like it'd be entertaining to watch and things. Carnival is just a mini fair, so I'd nix that too. But I mean, the zoo for me is you get the. We're also spoiled. I think Columbus Zoo is a great zoo. It's
Mhm.
like what we have those aspects. You can get the food you want. It's not completely overpriced at the zoo. We have our drink stuff, so we buy our bottle for the year that we can then have a $1 refill each time. Like so, like the cost of it for us, like, and I can go to the zoo anytime I want then for free, basically because of a membership. There's not a lot of add-ons or shows. Like, man, the zoo's where it's at.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm a zoo person as well, given that list. I would also add the state fair. Put the state fair in there. Does that still?
Nope. We haven't
Nope.
gone to I the last time I went to the state fair, I think was Stacy and I went to go see a concert with my parents. Like I think oh shoot, who was it? Who's the band that sings Take You on a Magic Carpet Ride?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, it's an old school like 80s rock band. You would know them. That's gonna drive me insane. And I was
Magic
like,
carpet ride?
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna look this up. So you explain your answer because that's gonna drive me. I'm not gonna be able to focus the rest of the show.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, growing up, we always went to state fair every summer. State fair was our family thing. And now as an adult, I've not uh, carried that tradition forward. A few times I've gone to state fair as an adult, but not on a regular basis like
Okay.
we used to when I was a kid. Minnesota State Fair, I would have to say that's a really good one. And that having lived up there, it was a fun experience, just real relaxed, really interesting displays, good food, and so on. But I would also prefer the zoo as well.
Yeah.
I like the
I
animals. I'm fascinated by them
yeah.
and
And I mean,
everything.
I did fairs as a kid. I showed animals, I showed llamas, and so I had those nights of sleeping at the fair with the llamas, to have to take care of them all day and stuff like that. So I've been through those experiences. And that's not for me. And it's Steppenwolf.
That's what I was gonna say, but I wasn't sure. Okay,
So
Steppenwolf. Yeah.
I like, and it's funny because like if you're listening to this and I do this all the time when I listen to podcasts. People like, if you're listening and you know the answer that the people who are hosting, you're screaming it in your car going, "It's Seven Wolf! Come on! How do you guys not know this?" Uh, and so I get it if you were screaming just 5 minutes ago listening to this, like, how do you guys not know this? Um, that's why I had to check. So like I understand and I understand your frustration as a listener. So
Wow, look at that empathy with the listener and just the putting yourself in their shoes. Good for you, Greg. That's awesome.
I try. I try.
And now people are going to listen to that song after this podcast, or maybe you'll stop the podcast and listen to the song. Who
Like, you
knows?
know what? Now you guys are talking about this. I've already switched off. They aren't even listening to this part because they've already switched off because they knew who it was and
Right.
turned us off so they could listen to the said song. Like, it's time
Exactly.
born. It's born to be wild now. That's what time it is.
That's right. There you go. All right. So Christian voices and public dialogue. I mean, it's all over the place with, right now our current situation with Iran and what's happened there. And that happened this weekend. And I knew going into Sunday, even within our church, there's various political perspectives on that. Whether you agree with the bombing of Iran or not, there are agreements and disagreements even within our own church
Yeah.
around just that. So, um, yeah, we Christians can engage in the public dialogue and should in a way that's respectful, and thoughtful.
Right.
And for me, just a week, was it 2 weeks ago on a Friday, we have a Friday morning men's Bible study, and we took a moment, we took a pause on what we've been normally doing, and we just dug into um, ICE enforcement
Mm,
and what we thought around the table about ICE, not necessarily ICE itself, but the actions of ICE and so on, and what's a
yeah.
Christian perspective on that. And there was various opinions about it, but it wasn't a mean-spirited conversation. It was very respectful, thoughtful, biblical,
Mm,
thinking through deeply like what is a Christian response to
yeah.
the vitriol within our country around just that as well as
Yeah.
immigration and ICE enforcement and so on. So it can be done, and because I've experienced it. It's just how we get there is the thing.
Hmm. Well, and I think a good starting point is that group, like your men's Bible study, you have that group. Like you said, you're very split and diverse throughout beliefs and thoughts, even in that group. But how long have you all been meeting together
Right.
every
Yeah.
single week? You guys get together, you have some breakfast food, you talk. So it's in person. There's a sense of community. There's a sense of, hey, we respect each other. We might not agree on everything, but we're going to have a dialogue. And I think that's a huge step to allow that to happen, right?
Mhm. Yeah, that's very true. I mean, that there's a long trust. There's
Yeah.
established trust between the people and a mutual respect, given that. You're absolutely right. That has to be in play.
Hmm.
But even when it's not in play,
Yeah.
um, if Christians will uh, debate something in the public square with people they don't know, it's really important how we approach it in
Mm.
a way that's thoughtful, respectful. So I picked up this book a year and a half ago at a conference. I haven't read it until now. This book's called The After Party and Toward Better Christian Politics, by Curtis Chang and Nancy French. By the way, I would recommend anybody to pick up this book. I just started reading it, um, partly in preparation for this podcast conversation. I knew we were going to talk about it, but also I'm like, it's just been sitting on my shelf. I'm like, I need to read this because of just life. We need to dig into this and do this even better. So let me point out a couple of things they point out as it relates to the conversation we're having here and chime in and see where you
Yeah.
fall.
Yeah.
They start the book out by saying there are there are people that disappear from our lives because of political disagreements we have with them.
Mm.
We may have eliminated them from our social media feeds, and maybe they're longtime friends that we've had or family members that now we stop talking to because of various and sundry political views on particular topics.
Yeah.
And we just go, I don't want to hear it anymore. Maybe they're mean-spirited, or maybe they pull something out of us and we just kind of react and react and react. And I understand, me too. But the authors point out, like back in like the 80s in Argentina, there was a political movement that literally took political opposition against the dominant government, and they would take people away.
Mm,
And these literally people would disappear. They were political opponents of the current government in the 80s. And mothers of those people banded together. They met in the public square and they would say their people's names of those who were disappeared.
mm,
And they called them the mothers of the disappeared. And Sting wrote a song about this. U2 wrote a song about it in the 80s. The U2 songs on the Joshua Tree album, Sting wrote a song called They Dance Alone.
mm.
Uh, and they said, think about that analogy.
Yeah.
And then they said, here's an exercise. Take those people that have disappeared from your life and write their names down and say their names. And what do you feel about them? And what do you feel about the loss of them in your life? Getting away from politics, getting away from all those things.
Mm,
There's a grief and sadness that comes with that. And a like, oh shoot, this is real life.
yeah.
And how do we start to reconcile differences to move toward those people instead of completely eliminating them from our life? I thought that was a really powerful
Mm,
beginning. Yeah. I wrote down some names. I mean, like, oh yeah, I got some names of people
yeah.
in my life that
Wow.
disappeared. Yeah. What are your thoughts about just that?
Well, I think it's an interesting exercise because I think I think there's some whether it's been good or bad, right, that you maybe have separated from that because there is a knowing, we've talked about Henry Cloud before, like his book Boundaries. Like you need to know your boundaries as well of like if seeing what someone is posting online or every single conversation you leave where it's like it's physically and mentally affecting you nonstop. Like there is health, like mental health and things like that. So I get it.
Yeah.
But like, but even in that process of like, if you look at the list of like, yeah, that doesn't mean there still isn't grief, right? Like even when you say like, yes, if I'm looking at it from the side of maybe I've unfriended them on Facebook or maybe I just haven't reached out as much because like, I'm weary of what it'll do, in my mental headspace and stuff. Like to have a conversation is exhausting. Like you can still think though of like there's a grief, there's a loss there that is another side of that because of like you can when you write down those names, like I'm sure you can think of the memories in those moments. You're like, oh, I remember when we did this, and
Mhm.
like those feelings. And I think sometimes we forget about that too, and so we don't realize that we're grieving that relationship or that friendship, just by slowly pulling it outside of our life too.
Yeah, exactly. It humanizes it, right?
Yeah.
It takes it away from like we've vastly worlds apart on this issue, and I'm so frustrated this person holds this point of view. But at the end of the day, we had history together. There was a point where we didn't have that disagreement and we hung out together or whatever. Yeah, I mean, so it's recognizing the human side of all this. And then they go into just the couple of things I want to point out. Um, we get to like uh that politics is really complicated, and as Christians, we move toward um our story of politics is we start with Jesus,
Mm.
then we have an ideology, party policy around a specific an issue.
Yeah.
Jesus pointing to an ideology, and then it points to what of politics, the what is. So what's it look like, right?
Hmm.
And then what happens is sometimes the trouble is we go Jesus and he must agree with his ideology. And then we smash them together. Or they
Mm.
said put a plus sign. And now they're linked together.
Mm.
And then you have the what. And that's the dangerous place of it. Because then Jesus gets enmeshed into your ideology. left or right. And it's not a plus sign or an equal sign. It's an arrow, they said. It's more about Jesus influencing our ideology, which
Mm,
influences the what. But everybody's got it. Everybody's got the arrow. And we need to get away from the plus signs and the equal signs and move, just recognize that there's influences from Jesus into these pieces for us and for our people who disagree with us
yeah.
that are Christians, right? And if they're not Christians, there's an influence that's asking them, they're thinking, oh, this is why I think the ideology is correct.
Mm,
Uh, and that was a really important starting point, I thought. Just
yeah.
that's helpful.
Yeah, it almost, and I haven't read this book, but it almost comes off of like it's rather than tie, it was so easy we tie into, when there's a political issue that Jesus wouldn't do A or B or would do, B or A or B. And so,
Yeah.
and then in turn, Jesus would uphold this policy or this policy. Whereas then this is saying it's more fluid than that of like, it's like Jesus was influence you in your belief of like where you stand, and then you kind of figure out because of who Jesus is and who Jesus is to you where you line up with those beliefs rather than saying Jesus would agree with this 100 or
Mhm.
vice versa. Is that kind of what it's?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I think
Yeah.
that's an I think that's an I think that's a helpful take because I do think uh whatever issue it is, and like you said, whether you're left or right, you're so passionate about it. And then if you can somehow get Jesus on your side,
Hmm.
on your team, well, then it demonizes the other party even more so because you're like, well, Jesus would never. And then so you're like, you can't be a Christian if you do if you are a Democrat or a Republican because or you're, conservative or liberal
Hmm.
because then we're like, because I know Jesus would agree on this side. And so it's rather than taking of how does Jesus influence you when it comes to these policies more? Hmm.
Exactly. Right,
Yeah.
right. Exactly. Um, and they point out like, and we've pointed out before in our podcast and our conversations, and other people have that within the 12 disciples, you have Simon the Zealot and
Yep.
Jesus or Matthew the tax collector, which tells us something. And they unpack that a little more, the power of that, which is Jesus striking at the heart of what we're talking about. Like Jesus is not linked with the zealots, and he's not linked with the tax collectors. He's not linked with Rome or the zealots who are against it. There's a point where Jesus is not necessarily above it, but he's in the midst of it, showing them a better way forward.
Mhm.
And that's the ticket. And so they talk about like the way forward is how we engage in these things. The what is important, but only after how we choose to engage these
Mhm.
conversations. And so they talk about having hope and humility. And this is the paragraph. Jesus shifted his disciples away from remaining exclusively preoccupied with the existing want of politics to an increasing commitment to his distinctive how of politics. This how of politics begins with the spiritual values that Jesus taught, including love, forgiveness, mercy, justice, truth, and hope and humility.
Mhm.
And they're talking about how, loving your enemies applies to both Matthew and Simon the Zealot. They have to both love their enemy.
Yeah.
So,
There's not a correct enemy or a wrong.
right, exactly. So the how is love
Mhm.
before you get to the what of the conversation around taxes in the Roman world.
Mhm.
Um, and so lastly, they talk about, I mean, it's a big shift, the big shift is a shift, shifting the relative weight we place on the what versus the how. It is not taking our feet entirely off the what, right? The what's important.
Right.
Policies are important, decisions are important, but how we get there is more important. And how we treat each other as we move toward the what is more important than the what. And that's this is the point of the view of this book. And Jesus teaches a particular how to get there.
Right. Yeah. Wow. That's
Yeah. So last thing, the last quote for this what chapter? Practices over policy, relationships over party, spiritual values over ideology, the how over the what. This is the big shift that happens in the Jesus party. They're not making a new political party, right? Um,
2026, the
Jesus
Jesus
party.
party. Mike is
It-
the front runner. And I'm
right,
gonna
exactly.
be.
Yeah, on a ballot right now of the Jesus party. It's what makes the Jesus party hang together across political differences. We can disagree on the what if we are all moving toward Jesus in the how. And I think that's really important. Really well said, well stated in this book.
Yeah. I mean, I think I think it gets to the heart of the relationship. You know, we've been going through Galatians with my students, and you know, in Paul's letter to the Church of Galatia, like he's talking about like you're following these laws, and you're worried about the outcome of said law, but you're missing out on the heart of who Jesus is. You know, because you know when it's getting into the whole circumcision, non-circumcision stuff, and like I'm seeing like influence of this then in the party. It's not about the end is the what is important, but it's the how you get there. And if you're not in that relationship with Jesus, you're not living and you know and letting your pride step aside to allow Jesus to fill that space. Um, you might get to the what, but not in a healthy way or in the correct way.
Right, exactly. And then you've dismissed voices that may have been influential, even though they disagree with your perspective. Maybe the other side has a helpful way of looking at
Mm,
solving a problem that we just would dismiss because they're just of that other party, whatever that party
right.
is. And, you know, uh, if we're open in the how, we can get to a better what, I think.
Mm,
And that's where it's important. So Christians need to be involved in politics. Uh, any Christian, not just because we're in America and that's part of our Constitution. It's just, Jesus was political in that way. He involved himself in the world that he lived in.
yeah.
And
And I think it's that how, you know, we've talked about this on the podcast a lot as well, but it's, you know, you mentioned humility at the beginning of one of those words, like if we can't come at a humble spot, we're not going to move anywhere moving forward, right? Jesus exampled humility, like the ultimate humility of what he did on the cross for us. But if we come in without being able to say, I might not be right on everything,
yeah,
like we're not going to have those conversations that you have with the men's Bible study or something like that because and I think that's where you can also understand to have those conversations and maybe some of those people that we've talked about that we've grieved aren't able to come at it from the humility standpoint and then maybe it is okay to say you know what I'm going to grieve that relationship but that relationship isn't there for me and look at how you can continue to pursue other ones that will strengthen and encourage and allow you to have these conversations because you it has to be a two-way street. It can't be like I can come if I'm having a conversation like well I might be wrong in something and the other person shows that there's no way that they could ever be wrong about something. You're not going to take that conversation. It's not going to go
right,
anywhere.
right,
So like the
exactly.
both sides have to be willing to say, you might be right.
Yeah, yeah. I
And
think
that's
there's a
tough.
whole bunch of wisdom from the book of Proverbs that apply to this. Like, there's some people just will never listen. And the wise way forward is let's find a different conversation
Right.
or a different conversation partner. It's just not going to happen with that person. Yeah. Good stuff, Greg.
Man, next time people hear this podcast, it'll be for our 100th episode.
100.
I don't even know what we're going to do.
I know. What, people have to wait and see how we're going to celebrate the 100th episode of this podcast, the Faith and Life podcast.
We're going to live stream it, jumping out of an airplane with fireworks.
That's right. Exactly. Or
We'll just
climb a building in Taiwan. Yeah.
facing your fears, and we'll have a audio dialogue as we're falling in parachutes.
Right, right. That'd be fun.
That will not be fun. I would not do that
No,
ever,
that would
ever,
not be
ever.
fun, but the
Yeah.
conversation will be fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it'll be fun. So, and don't forget, vote for Mike for the Jesus Party
The Jesus
2026.
Jesus Party 2026. There you go. Thanks, Greg.
Yep.
Thanks, everybody.